right. Today I have Ryann Dowdy. She leads Be in the Room, which is a community. It's a podcast. It's a lot of things. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thanks. How are you?
Good, good. So let's kick off. I know I always do a poor man's version of people's introductions, but but I love hearing people's background kind of from their own voice. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? How'd you get here?
Sure. So my name is Ryann Dowdy. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. As you shared, I lead a community called Be in the Room, which is a community for high achieving women to come together and have open and honest and vulnerable conversations. I started my career, actually, I spent 15 years in the corporate world before I became an entrepreneur, fell in love in startups in the MarTech space. It was before like MarTech was a thing. I'm aging myself right now, but that's what I did. And I built sales organizations. That was my jam. Is I did a lot of training and process development and those types of things. And I bounced from startup to startup and then had that moment of like, why don't I do this for myself and turn it into a business? So sales has been my jam for a very long time. My first business was a business called the Uncensored Sales. It was the Uncensored Sales Accelerator was our flagship program, and we helped high achieving women leave their 9-to-5 and build profitable businesses. And again, that was pre the Great Resignation having a name. I was an early adopter, as you can tell. So I did that for a couple of years, did about $1 million in sales in 2 years, had an awesome opportunity to start a second business with a business partner called Social Sellers Academy, where we trained sales teams for online entrepreneurs. So we found this huge gap of people wanting to get out a salesperson in their business and having no idea how to do that. So I teamed up with my then business coach and started that business at the end of 2020, early 2021. That business did about $730,000 in sales its first year. And we burned it all to the ground in the fourth quarter of 2021. So I'm sure we'll get into that. But, it really gave me an awesome opportunity to like, what do you want to do, right? Like, what's your zone of genius? All the different things, and decided that community and connection and bringing together smart women and really changing the face of leadership and changing the way we do business and the way we do life and the way we do leadership was really my calling. And so sales is now something I do. I consult, I love idea sharing, those types of things, but my primary day-to-day is running Be in the Room. I'm a mom. I have a 17-year-old stepdaughter, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and there's just never a dull moment around here.
I love it. And as a new dad, I'm trying to figure out handling 1 with my wife, and 3 sounds pretty insane.
The 17-year-old's pretty self-sufficient, so it's just the 2.
Fair enough. So there's so much in there that I want to dive into, especially zone of genius. That's a brilliant phrase. So we're going to get into that, but I'm going to steal a new question that I'm using that came from another guest. What did you want to be when you were growing up? What did you see yourself being when you were older?
A writer. I was 9 when I decided I was going to write a book. I almost went to college to be a journalism major and changed last minute. Did not really like the idea of being part of the press, right? Like, I was like, I'd much rather write opinion pieces. This is fact check business. So I was like, what should I do instead? Advertising. There I can share my opinion with people who care. And I always really thought I would get into the creative space, but I found that I'm actually not like super creative in that way. I am very creative when it comes to business and business ideas and strategy and all those things. But I sold advertising for 15 years in some way, shape, or form. Never intended to be in sales, certainly never intended to be an entrepreneur, but it was like the first memory I have of like, this is what I'm going to be when I grow up as a writer.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right. A writer. All right. I like it.
Fun fact, I did write a book, and it was a best-selling, an international bestseller. So,
okay. What's the name of it?
It's called the 100K Sales Method.
100K Sales Method. Okay, so it's going on the bookshelf.
Perfect. It's very pink. I love it. The cover's very pink.
I love it. So in kind of doing research, and I mean, we had our prep call, and like we were just talking and vibing, which was great, and then I did my research as I do for every guest. And in your bio, it says you were feeling bored, you were feeling stuck, you were feeling frustrated, and you were feeling guilty. And I'm very curious because we have very similar kind of journeys, corporate world, having some type of feeling. And I'll kind of share a little bit about mine, but why guilty? That stuck out to me. And I'm interested, why guilty?
Because on paper, I had it all and it didn't feel like enough. And I felt guilty for not being okay with what I had.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, that's interesting because similar, I felt like I did everything kind of quote unquote the right way, right? Like,
Yep.
I did well in school. I got got a good job. I was excelling in my career. I got, found this awesome girl. I got married. We're about to have a kid. And I don't know if I would say that I felt unfulfilled. I would say that I felt like I wasn't maximizing my potential.
That's right.
And I think that was kind of the impetus for me to be like, you know what, like I need to branch out. I need to bet on myself once. And so as I kind of was reading about you and your story, and you talked about guilty and wanting more, even though you had a lot, like, what was it? Was there a specific moment? Or was there just kind of this overwhelming, like cascading feeling of, yeah, I don't want to do this for the next 15 years. What was that?
So it's a snapshot in time. So not like a bolt of lightning, but there was a very specific time. My son Davis is 5. And so he was born in 2017. At the time I'd spent years prior to that traveling, was always that person that would get parachuted into markets and go solve sales problems. And so to me, the dream job was running my own sales team in an environment where I didn't have to travel as much. And so I got that job. Literally while I was pregnant, I consulted for a company and was like, hey, after my maternity leave, you should hire me. And they did. They brought me in as their director of sales. And I remember being excited to go back to work, right? So many moms will tell you the story of like, oh, I cried, on my first day back to work. And like, I had mom guilt over like not having mom guilt. I was like, woo, I get to like go use my brain. And I'm so excited to do that. And not that I don't love being a mom, but I love business and it's fun. So I go to work and I just remember like I would be sitting at my desk and I would look around and I was just like, I feel like I'm supposed to feel different about this, right? Like this is supposed to feel different. Yeah. And so like there was this period of time. So Davis was born in February, back to work in April. I went to a conference in July, and then wound up, I think, hiring my first coach in October. So there's that period from basically April to October where I just like, I thought this would feel different, right? Like I thought this would be different. I thought that this experience would look different. And so I just remember that snapshot of like what's missing happening. And in that time, there was very much that guilt of like, you have your dream job. Like I was sitting in this beautiful office that overlooked this like pond in an office park. I got to pick all of my own furniture, right? Like it was so fun. And that's where like the guilt came in of like, why can this not be enough? Like, why can't you just be happy? And that's really, I think, where the guilt came in. But it was that time period where I just remember, leaving the office on like a Friday and feeling so glad to be done. And never having had that feeling before. Right. So it was a period of time where I very much remember questioning everything.
Right. Right. So where did the idea of entrepreneurship come? Like where, at what point did you decide, you know what, I can't find a job that's going to give me the feeling, I need to go create it?
So I went to a conference in July of 2017. So I played in the direct sales space. I worked for a Napa Valley based winery. We did in-home wine tastings, and their annual conference was we lovingly called it Wine Camp, right? Like, so we went to Las Vegas and went to wine camp. Every new mom's dream. I was like, here's my kid, I'm out. It was really great. And there was a speaker, Rory Vaden. He wrote the book, Don't Take the Stairs. Really good book. Obviously, as you know, as the keynote, we all got a copy of the book. And I went home and read the book. And his whole thing was like, success is not, it's like, I'm going to butcher it, but the gist of it is like, success is not earned, it's rented, and the rent is due every day. Right. Like that was kind of the whole messaging. And so it got me back on this personal development journey that I did early on in my career. Right. I read books and I studied and I just kind of got complacent. And so that book kind of inspired me to get back on that journey. At the time, we're building a house and we're living with my mother with my 4-month-old and 2 dogs. And so I'm commuting from my mom's house to my office, which is like a 45-minute commute because they live like outside of town. And so I started listening to books. And I listened to the book, Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass. And she talks about having a coach and needing a coach. And even the best athletes have coaches, right? Olympic athletes have coaches, like, executives in Fortune 50 companies have coaches. And I remember having the thought of like, when I needed a coach was when I was like 25 years old, trying to figure out what to do with my life and not knowing where to go to get that advice. College doesn't ever really answer that question for most people. Your friends are in the same boat you are, and you don't want to go complain to your boss, right? Like, where do you go to have that conversation? And I'm in a space where my mother, while super supportive, she didn't have a wildly successful career. So I'm like, that's when I needed support and advice. And so that's really where the first idea was planted. I had no idea what to do with that idea until I connected with a girlfriend of mine who was launching a program or launching a community called The Free Mama, where she helped women start freelancing businesses. And so she and I had worked together in another life. We'd stayed connected on social media. She actually wrote the foreword of my book. Her name is Lauren Bolden. And she was the first coach that I hired in October of 2017. And so she was, just several steps ahead of me and just opened my eyes to what was available as far as entrepreneurship. Because to me, I had sold advertising for 15 years. Entrepreneurship, owning a business was owning a brick and mortar business, right? It was owning a store. It was owning something like that. Like the whole idea of like service-based businesses and B2B businesses, that wasn't a space that I played in. And that's what really kind of opened the window. And again, it was like, oh, well, I'll be a coach for that. I knew that I couldn't be a freelancer. My attention to detail is just not that. And so that's really where it started. And I just started reading books and talking to people and hanging out in Facebook groups and watching webinars and really learned all about like info products and, the expert economy and all of that. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
That's fascinating to me because there are a couple of things I heard. I heard kind of reading a lot of books and kind of like you said, that restarting the engine of the self-help journey, right? Or the personal development. Without a doubt, I know that I went through that too. I had this like, I'm reading two books a month, and then it kind of fades away, and then you get reinvigorated when you read another one. And then I also heard kind of this theme of just kind of also empowering women that were around you. And so kind of one of the questions is, how did you define your niche? How did you find your customer base? So I'm curious how much of creating this community specifically for female leaders come from the impact of women leaders and women coaches in your personal life?
Yeah, it actually comes back to like me coming up as an athlete is really where the need and desire to serve women started, as an athlete, right? I was a college athlete. I was a Division I athlete, and the way that female athletes are treated versus male athletes, right? Interning in college and the way the male interns are treated versus the female interns, right? Like I noticed there was a difference very early on. Fortunately, I was a salesperson and I was good at my job, so it wasn't really an issue for me. I never felt capped in my career in any way because I was a woman, but I noticed it, right? And I noticed that there were not a lot of female leaders rallying around women. There were not a lot of women to look up to and be like, okay, what is my career path? Where can I go? What's available to me? Right? Like there was not a lot of that in my sphere. Like my very first job out of college, I worked on an all-female sales team. And that was it. Right? Like when I was pregnant with my first son, like I was the only woman on a team, and we never talked about the fact that I was pregnant. Like other than like the HR conversation of like, like it was like, does anybody else travel and have a newborn? Like, what does this look like? Like, it was just never discussed. Right. So I think that happened. And then where it was like, when did I need guidance in my life? It was when I was young. And then when, as a leader, I was the director of sales for a digital ad agency, and we would go to career fairs, and the difference between the way young men and young women presented themselves professionally was appalling. Like, I was like, this is awful. I once had a girl tell me she just wanted her first big girl job in marketing. I had another girl sit in my office and twirl her hair through an entire interview. And while not every dude I interviewed or hired, he turned out to be a rock star, just their confidence was remarkably different. And I was like, well, this is why the wage gap exists. This is why there's a glass ceiling. Like, this is what is wrong. And I think, you know, the fixer in me was like, I want to fix that. I want to change that. Like, this is crazy. So I think that's where it really started, the desire to serve women. Like I said, being an athlete, coaching young girls. I had coached girls volleyball. And again, just the confidence, right? Like, just wasn't there for women. And that just really drove me nuts. So I think it was just this desire to elevate women and encourage them and build them up in different ways that I've not worked with enough men to tell you men don't feel that way, or men don't have those experiences, because I'm not a dude, so I don't know. But I just saw such a marked difference in those things. So I think part of it was just, I really wanted to change that. And then especially, like I said, learning, you know, looking around and being like, there's not a lot of women for me to look up to. You know, I mean, I had all the coaches that I've hired have been women. But outside of that, like, there was never, aside from my very first manager, that's a lie. I've had 2 leaders in my entire career that were women. Otherwise, all dudes, great people, hugely helpful for my career, but like, nobody for me to be like, that's what I want my career to look like, or that's what I want my life to look like, or that's, you know, the trajectory that I have. You know, my boss at my last job, you know, was a 50-something-year-old white dude who was retired. Like, his wife was retired, you know, all the other stuff. The job before that, the guy had 5 kids and his wife was a stay-at-home mom, right? Like, there was nobody that looked like me in the places that I wanted to go.
Right. I'm inspired by that being kind of the driving force of your mission. The other piece that's going to go on off my mind is just, it's fascinating. In my career, I've had the most success under female leaders, without a doubt. Like, as I look at my career projection, I was probably operating at my best when I worked for women. And so as I became a leader and kind of was coaching and hiring folks, one of the things that I was very fascinated with, especially during performance review time, the word assertiveness didn't come. It always came up. And so I know this is a slight tangent, but I'm very curious about your perspective on this, just based on what you said. How do you react to the idea of, well, she needs to be more assertive, as like performance review feedback? What does that do for you? I'm just going to leave it like that and kind of see how you respond to that. Because that,
you might be surprised to learn that I've never been given that feedback. Nope, that was not a problem for me. Yeah. Ever.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've ever said that in a performance review. That is not probably the word that I would have used.
Yeah.
I would have used words like, you know, I would really like to see you put yourself out there more often, or I would really like to hear you bring your ideas to the table more frequently, or I would love, you know, for you to celebrate your wins a little bit louder. Like, those are words that I would use to give somebody feedback, all which could be summed up under the word more assertive. So I think I would have been, as a female leader, I'm very sensitive to not use that language, because you might as well say, like, you just need to be a bigger bitch, and nobody likes that. Am I allowed to say that? Sorry. So that's kind of my thought. I was never given that feedback. Not once me that I'm more assertive. I would avoid using that word, because, like I said, for a lot of women, assertive and aggressive is a fine line.
Yeah.
And what I think people mean, like I said, when they say assertive, is I want to hear from you more.
Right.
I want you to speak up more. I want you to share your ideas more. I want to hear your wins more. I want to hear what's going on.
Right. Right. No, it's you're spot on, and I feel like, and I probably have fallen into the bucket of using that term, but I think you're right. It's that fine line of We're not saying be more aggressive. Like, we're not trying to say, be yourself. Like, at the core, be yourself. At the same time, in this atmosphere, we want people to be able to have the confidence to speak up, the confidence to say how you feel, because if you keep it to yourself, we're not able to tap into the most value that you can provide. And so I just think back into those performance review calls, and it was just it felt like a loaded word. It felt very loaded. And we never really deconstructed it effectively, in my opinion.
Sure. Well, because again, it's the connotation of the word, right? Like, if we Googled the definition of assertive, it's probably the appropriate word that you're trying to use, right? But it's like, what's the emotional charge behind the word? And I think that's the thing, is assertive and aggressive and bitchy are all a fine line, and no woman wants to be that. So that's not the word that I want to hear.
Right. Absolutely. All right. So, okay, back on the entrepreneurship topic, but thank you for the slight tangent. So you've been reinvigorated by this conference, by reading these books. You got yourself a coach. You kind of have shaped this mission. Tell me a little bit about the willpower when things were going slow. And maybe this is your sales background, but I'm just curious, because as someone that's trying to build a community of entrepreneurs with this podcast, it's a slow build. And I'm curious, kind of, what was that like for you?
So notice this whole story is 2017. Yeah. And I didn't leave my full-time job until June of 2019.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I like to tell people that I started a business in 2018 and I started making money in 2019. So I spent all of 2018, I tell people, getting ready to get ready, right? Sometimes reading books and listening to podcasts and watching the webinars is also a really good stalling tactic.
Yes.
And there was a lot of that for me. It was a very slow burn, all the different things. So it was a very long journey, and not a very long journey. That's a lie. It took a year, but the internet promised it would happen in 5 minutes. So it felt like a long time.
Yep.
So, 2018 was just a really interesting year of figuring out, who am I and who do I want to be and how to have a voice and how to help people. And I didn't have a framework. I didn't know what I was doing. And notice my whole niche started as I wanted to help young women better present themselves professionally. And I ultimately wound up being a sales coach. Right. And so I think you had asked me the question early on, like, how did you choose your niche of serving women? That's always been the case. But I actually think that the rush to niche actually handcuffs a lot of people, because ultimately when I finally started making money, it was when I stopped being so attached to like who I helped and how I helped them and what I wanted. And I just started talking to people and I was like, oh, I can solve that problem. Oh, I can solve that problem. Oh, I can solve that problem. And I just started solving problems for people. Sure. I sold one-on-one coaching sessions and I sold 60 packages and I sold consulting packages. Like, I just made it up for a very long time until I had worked with enough different people to be able to say, okay, this is who I want to serve. This is how I want to serve them. This is the framework that I'm going to walk them through. But it took me literally 1.5 years to do all of that. So from early 2018 to my career and life coaching to halfway through the years being like, those people, they're not yet problem aware and they don't have any money. So we're not going to serve them. But sales, I did see an opportunity in sales and sales consulting and building sales orgs. But I worked with all different types of people. I grossly undercharged for my services and all of those things. And I think it was just pure stubbornness at that point that I was just like, I'm just going to keep going, one foot in front of the other. It was also helpful that I had an income, right? My bills were paid. There was no pressure for the business to support me or my family. So I think that probably also helped with the persistence, right? I think a lot of people rush into quitting jobs and don't necessarily have that. And then there creates pressure in a not great way. And I'm not mad about that. I think to each their own. But for me, the business was not needed to pay the bills, right? It wasn't needed to pay the mortgage. It wasn't needed to pay for daycare. It wasn't needed to do those things. So I think that also, I don't know if that was a blessing or a curse, right? Did it make it a longer runway because I had this space, or did it give me opportunity to be creative and figure out what I wanted to do? Tomato, right? So fast forward, we get through 2018, we get to 2019. I finally start figuring out, I don't like serving clients one-to-one. I'm not really meant to be a done-for-you service provider. I don't have the attention to detail for it. I'm a really good strategist. I have excellent ideas, not awesome execution. And then I really got into, okay, this is knowing that I really niched down to helping women leave their 9-to-5s. Like those were my people, women who were successful in their careers and wanted to be successful in their business. I found that niche, but I found it through networking. I found it through talking to people. I found it through a lot of trial and error. And then ultimately decided that that's what I wanted to do. Developed a framework, tested it for super cheap, tested it in a 4-week program, tested it in a lot of different ways before we finally launched a 12-month program where we were walking women through this framework. So this all starts from it was January 2018 that I went onto the internet and told them that I was going to start a business. And it was July 2019 that I finally did my first significant launch of a group coaching program that created sustainable recurring income.
Yeah, I like it. As you were talking, I was kind of playing through my own particular journey, the amount of prep work and research it takes to build up that confidence to jump, right? I've been thinking about going full-time entrepreneur since 2019, late 2019. Yeah. And like you said, that thought in my mind of, because I have a full-time job, I'm procrastinating. I can acknowledge I have enough self-awareness to say I'm not grinding at the level that I should.
Sure.
Because I have a 9-to-5 job and I have income coming in. I'm pretty comfortable. But I also think that for me, the strategy of, okay, there's going to be a line in the sand. And even with that, the line in the sand kept moving. It was do I do January? Do I do March? And then my wife tells me that we're pregnant. And I was like, okay, well, the line in the sand has to happen somewhere around that.
Right. Yep.
And so it is you're right. There's wisdom in doing the due diligence and the preparation and the research. But at the same time, you've got to be aware and have the discipline to not let it be the crutch that stops you from starting. You see what I mean? That's such a well-made point.
And my second kiddo was also my line in the sand. So Georgia, it was probably around the fourth quarter of 2018 where I started signing some consulting clients and stuff, not enough to replace my income, but had actual income coming in from the business, is when we found out I was pregnant with Georgia. And I knew come hell or high water, I was not going back to work after that kid was born. And honestly, I probably could have quit 3 or 4 months before I did. But at that point, I'm pregnant. I have benefits. I have, at least not a maternity leave by any stretch of imagination, but short-term disability and other things. So I'm like, why speed this up? Not knowing, a million different things can happen when you have a kid, right? So I probably could have quit in March of 2019 income-wise. I had to replace that salary pretty consistently, but Georgia was born in June. So I was like, well, there's just no reason to leave at this point. So technically I didn't resign until August because I was on maternity leave, but I kind of used Georgia's birthday as my drop dead date where I was like, I ain't go back.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the journey. We talked about you getting, to entrepreneurship. I'm curious, especially as someone, and this may just be my weird way of looking at it. You're in sales, right? So another way of putting that is going and getting the money comes natural to you. Right? So what are some of the things that you're actively working on or you're currently struggling with, assuming revenue isn't specifically your number one issue?
Currently or in that time frame?
Currently.
There's the mindset piece that is never discussed in the corporate world. Selling somebody else and selling yourself is insanely different.
Yeah.
Insanely different. So I think there's that, right? Challenges. It's like, I just launched a new program in January, and what you start with is not what you end with. So right now it's just fine tuning the messaging in the market and the ideal client, right? You sell something to somebody and you're like, don't think they're my ideal client, right? So I'm still in that first 12 months of something brand new. So it's just figuring out, okay, how do we better serve our clients? How are we over serving our clients? Is there something missing? Is there too much? Or are we people using the stuff that's in our program? So I'm very much in that fine tuning. And then also really zeroing in on who the exact right person is for what we do. So I'm in that season of business where it's like, we can sell it, but I want to sell it to the right person who's going to stay for years, not to anybody who will give me money.
Do you enjoy the kind of cyclical nature of the challenge?
Yes.
Interesting.
Absolutely. Once it works, I'm dead. Like once so the last 10 companies we just burned to the ground, they were very much personal brand businesses. Well, the other one was with a partner. I would have ended that differently had I had choices. The first one though it was me. It was my face. There was no way to sell that to someone else. Right. When I started Be in the Room, I very much started it from a place of how do I build a business that runs without me? Because the goal is by the end of 2023, it does run without me. It doesn't need me. So I want to make it work. I want to build the team. I want to infuse the mission and the vision and the life into what we do. And I will let somebody else run it because I like to build things. I don't like to run things.
We're very similar in that regard.
Well, the first time we talked about that. I'm like, I'm a builder, not a runner. It's not my jam. It's kind of boring.
Yeah, like I'm the guy that you bring in to fix the problem, but once it like the system is built, to like take me out of it because I'm gonna keep tinkering.
Right. And I'm gonna break it again so I can fix it.
Exactly. So another thing that kind of popped in my mind as you were talking is around the concept of kind of your growing family. You started you're in a career, you have started testing the waters of entrepreneurship. This isn't intended to be kind of like the typical work-life balance question. I think what I really want to get out is how has that kind of work-life integration evolved and changed through your roles from corporate world to entrepreneurship? Because as you have a growing family, your time commitments increase. And as you become an entrepreneur, your time commitments increase. So what does that look like for you?
I work very normal business hours. My kids both go to, my older one goes to camp. He'll be in kinder in the fall. My younger one goes to daycare full time. My husband stays home. We kind of joke that Kevin is the project manager and I'm the project. So he runs the world. And so I work very traditional hours because that's when my kids are gone, right? Like my kids leave the house at 8:00 in the morning, they come home at 4:00 in the afternoon. So that's primarily when I work. It was very different when I was doing, the side hustle thing, right? I worked in the morning, I worked over lunch break, I worked after my son went to bed, all those different things. I was probably a full-time entrepreneur for about 7 months before my husband quit his job. And kind of took over all of those things for me. I don't believe that it is that I like your term of work-life integration. Like for me, I just like to call it life, right? Like we go to work and we mom or dad or parent or friend or sister, cousin, son, daughter, whatever it is that we do. But I keep pretty traditional hours and that helps me. I think it's just been a journey. Like if you'd asked me that question 3 years ago, I'd probably have given you a very different answer. But for now, I don't feel like it's that much of a challenge for us. But I'm also blessed with an extremely, I told you that before we hit record, like we have so much support, right? We live in Kansas City. This is where our family is. My parents are picking my kids up from school today. Yesterday, my husband went golfing. So my sister-in-law picked the kids up. Like we just have so much support that we are just so blessed in that way. Right. I think it'd probably be very different if like it was just my husband and I, and we lived somewhere we didn't have access to those resources and we had to do everything ourselves, versus how we show up now. So, I still very much, I've always been, and I said this, even when I was working a full-time job, like my desire was never to be a stay-at-home parent. My desire obviously was never for my kids to be home all the time, even though my husband is home and they could be home. They're happier and they have more fun when, like, my kid last week got to go to Legoland, and like next week he's going to Science City. And 2 weeks ago, they went to a petting zoo at camp. Like, he's having more fun than, following my husband around while he like grocery shops and mows the lawn and drops his sister off to pick up her car and all the stuff that he does day to day. And so I'm probably a little different than a lot of women where I'm like, I don't feel this really strong, compelling, like my children, I'm the only person who can raise them. I think it takes a village, and my kids have a huge one and they're so blessed.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I love the self-awareness of it, right? Like, one of the things you started with is just like, I knew this about myself. I knew this was the situation. I contextualized the fact that we're in a place where we have a support system. So yeah, like that self-awareness is incredibly key. Well, I'm curious, and I'm starting to ask every guest this because it's a question that I've used to run my life. And even when I talk to other people or they ask for advice, I use it. Could you describe to me what Tuesday 5 years from now looks like for you?
No.
Interesting. I'm so interested because you're the first person that is just like, no, I can't. Not. That's a very interesting response. I haven't even
considered that as an answer.
I haven't considered that as an answer. No, I'm like genuinely like.
Here's why.
Yeah.
Speaking of self-awareness, right? Like 5 years ago could describe, a year ago. What are you doing on July 13th, 2022 at the time we're recording this? Totally different. Like, I could have told you what it looked like and what I was doing. Like, I just feel like entrepreneurship and life and the options that we have are so plentiful that, like, who knows what I'm doing? Like, I could be retired and playing golf in Hawaii with my husband, or I can be running company number 26, or I can be like on a keynote circuit writing books. Like, yes to all of those things. Like, all of those things are amazing options. All of them are going to happen at some point in time. 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I don't know. No clue.
I'm genuinely excited that you have given me an answer that I 100% was not anticipating. And it's because I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. I talked to my therapist about this. I think about the future all the time. I was the kid at 16 that was like, oh my God, I can't wait to be 30. 30 is going to be incredible. Right. So for me, I live my life on this idea of what does Tuesday look like 5 years from now, because it gives me, and it's not just, I want to get coffee at 9 a.m. Like, yes, there's aspects and kind of tangible things around it, but I think it gives me like a good compass for what I want to achieve and what I want to go get. And so it's kind of my version of goal orientation, but why I'm so fascinating and impressed by I don't know what it looks like, is even in your answer, you describe things that you're very interested in doing.
Of course. You're
just not putting the time pressure on yourself to accomplish it, and your openness to things will work itself out, and it's going to happen. It's just very interesting to me. It's a very it's cool. I wish I had that kind of emotional stability to do.
So I will tell you this: you're how far out of your corporate identity? How long ago did you quit?
I officially a month and a half ago. Well, I mean, I was on parental leave, so technically I was checked out in February, but I technically was gone a month ago. Yeah. That
is an evolution that I have gone through, because honestly, coming out of corporate, first of all, I would have told you I was a control freak. I like to control everything, every minute of every day. Yeah. Don't anymore. Even a little, don't care. like was on a one-on-one with somebody on my team the other day, and she's like, oh, this, and this. And I was like, I didn't even know we were doing that. And she's like, well, you don't need to know. I'm like, cool. Whereas like 3 years ago, I'd be like, whoa, back up. Yes, I do. So for me, it's just been an evolution of getting to know myself, right? Because we operate in the box that we're put in. And in my corporate job as a director of sales, as somebody who traveled consistently, I had small kids, right? Like all those things, in that box, I needed to hold on for dear life because it was the only sense of control that I had, right? It was balancing all the things. I was probably doing a crappy job, right? There was so much pressure to be successful at work and to be a good mom and to be a good wife and to be a good friend and There was so much pressure to do all those things. The only way to do that was to hold on for dear life and plan every minute of every day. Okay. I've like completely deconstructed over the last 3 years of this person who like, I'm totally a visionary. I have lots of goals and plans and ideas for my life. Time's a little made up. And it's just like the way that it happens, it'll happen. Right. And I think there will be seasons. Like I'm probably the person who's going to retire like 3 times, and then somebody's going to like pull me back in with a really good idea, and that's just the way that I work. So this idea that like, I should know what it looks like in 5 years. Like I have a bucket list. I have goals. I have things I'm going to accomplish, and they're all going to ebb and flow in different seasons. Right. A couple of weeks ago, I'm on vacation. So 2 years ago, we buy our dream home that I'm sitting in right now, right? We're in a 6-bedroom, 5-bath house on a golf course, and I love life. And last week I was like, what do you think about selling our house and buying an RV? Right. It's like, you're insane. I'm like, cool. Can we get a puppy? He was like, yes, if we can give you a puppy instead of an RV, I'm here for it. Right. Like, I just cannot possibly imagine a world where I don't know, I could be living in an RV. I could not be, like I could have downsized and we built a townhome and we live in Airbnbs. Like I want to do all of those things. And so, I'll get there. I can tell you who I will be in 5 years on a Tuesday, but I cannot tell you what I will be doing.
I'm interested just because I'm fascinated by this answer. Who are you going to be in 5 years?
I will be the leader of a worldwide movement of women. I will be a best-selling author. I will be a keynote speaker. I will be a serial entrepreneur. I will be a happily married, wildly successful mom who loves her children. I will be someone who travels often and regularly. I will be someone who serves and inspires women every day. All of those things will happen, but how? Who cares?
It's interesting. So you're seeing me think like process in real time. It's
the possibility of this kind of freedom in your life.
Well, there's that.
Do you feel better or worse right now?
No, I feel great. I'm one that like loves perspective. So like I'm fascinated by the way people like just view things and process things, because I think that hearing the answer to that question, I actually think that we're not so different.
Sure.
In how we process.
Totally.
I think we're using different words, and I think that there's kind of power in the difference of the words that we're using. What you described in my mind is, okay, you've laid out your core values and the principles of what you want.
Yep. Versus
the things you want. And I think that there's a power in saying it's different from saying I want to have a private jet in 2020, in 2040. I want to be able to travel whenever I want and comfortably. Those are two very different things.
Sure. Right.
But one can serve the other, but they're two very different things. And I think that is, as I think about it, like that is very much kind of how I process or how I think through things. I think what does your Tuesday look like makes it a little bit more tangible. Sure. And it's interesting. It's a kind of just an interesting kind of a new way for me to think about it, which I really like. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And like I said, it has evolved so much for me. Like even the things in the business that I touch now versus the things in the business that I always thought that I would touch. Like I literally like the how, I don't care. Like how do we onboard clients? Don't care. Yeah. Right. Like what technology do we use to do da, 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 don't care, right? Like I have priorities, what's important to me in the business. I wear the hat that I wear in the business and that's it. But that has really very much been an evolution.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you this question because I'm very similar in the regards to, I know what I like doing. I know what I don't like doing. Right. I know what I'm really good at doing. I know what I'm good enough at doing. Right. And I, with my businesses, I'm very interested in being able to say, look, I don't really care how we do it. Just make it remotely look like this and like, do what you got to do. Like I empower you to be creative and kind of deliver the best work. But you said at the beginning, you were a little bit of a control freak. And so my question is, how did you get there? What is that like? What did that look like? Was it, okay, finally I figured something out. I cracked some formula. I've got revenue that allows me to hire somebody. And now I just fully empower that person. Or like, how did you work through that transition? How did you evolve?
It's an excellent question. It started with the things that I didn't like to do. And like, again, learning about like the gig economy and freelancers. And at the beginning, it was social media. Like I really hated posting social media content. And someone was like, you could hire somebody to do that for you. And I was like, that's fascinating. So I did. I was like, cool, this person can do this. And then that person came to me and said, we could do this, this, and this to make that more efficient. And I was like, cool, you should. Right. And then the business continued to grow. And then that person who was scheduling my social media, I'm like, do you have this skill set? Can you do this too? Can you do this too? And I just giving her things until I wasn't doing anything in the business I didn't want to do. She had also, in all fairness, this human happens to be my sister, but she very much just, took it and ran with it. We paid people to teach her things she didn't know how to do. We paid consultants to come in and do, it just all different things that we did. And then that kind of unlocked this thing in me of like, I never have to do anything I don't want to do ever again, in the business, really in life in general. And so that's just kind of started my journey of outsourcing everything. The biggest thing, in the business, again, I give my people parameters. I have a team that I really trust. Everyone that works for me, my sister works for me. My marketing manager, we worked together in a previous life, and my program director was a client before she worked for me. So I haven't hired a ton of strangers, and I've been very blessed to do so. Fortunately, I've also built a network that I don't know if I'll ever have to really hire a stranger, but, I hired people that I knew and trusted, people that were referred, people that were in my ecosystem, people that already knew enough about me when they said yes to working for me, what was going to be expected of them, right? The level of excellence, the way that I show up, what's important to me, all of those things. So a lot of that was just, I feel like I just was extremely blessed in that area. But I also learned in outsourcing things that if it can't be attached to how it gets done. And this is applied more at home. So my husband has been home. Gosh, it would have been February 2020, March 2020. It's pre-pandemic that my husband quit his job. And in the beginning, I tried to micromanage the way he did everything. Like the way he does laundry, nope, not like it's insane. The man does an obscene amount of laundry and it's completely unnecessary as far as I'm concerned. But you know what? I don't care because I don't do the laundry. Yeah. My children have clean clothes to wear every day. Same thing, like what my 3-year-old wears to school. Some days I'm like, did she leave the house? My husband's like, yeah. I'm like, I didn't dress her. Right. Like, so it's just, I had to pick the battles. He does all the grocery shopping. It's the most inefficient thing on the planet. The way he goes to like 3 different stores and all the other stuff. Don't care. The groceries are in the house, right? Like I had to not be attached to how it got done as long as it got done, and be okay with it not being done the way that I do it. So there are things in my business that are not done the way that I would do them, but if I don't have to do them and they get done, I don't care. As my company grows, right now we're a pretty small team. I'm sure that I'm going to have to pay somebody else to make sure that we operate efficiently. And that idea of like, there's more than one way to skin a cat, to use a like bad analogy, right? But there's more than one way to get it done. And as long as it's done and it gets done well, I don't care. But really then you can't just say you don't care and then micromanage the project. Like you have to legitimately not care. It took me a long time to get there. And, but yeah, there's questions I just don't ask. Like, and again, I'm aware that as we grow, I will have to have more efficiency and more consistency and more of those things. And I am so thankful that there are people on this planet whose brains care about those things. It's not mine.
I like it. Yeah, I definitely, these are all words of advice and words of wisdom for me, because like you said, like in a corporate environment, what you just described, I'm great at.
Nope.
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah. Like you do this. Mm-hmm. I think when you're signing the check, so to say, or I guess in this world, you know, clicking the PayPal button,
right?
Efficiency becomes like kicks in, and so yeah, it's an evolution. It's definitely something I'm working through myself.
But also learn that I pay people for results and not time.
Yeah.
And that's how I was so like, so when Shannon, my sister, came into the business and like she had an opportunity to learn things because I was paying her to do a thing, like set up the onboarding for our clients, right? Like in the beginning, we manually onboarded everybody. And obviously we created some automation and stuff. There were some technology she didn't know how to use to make that happen. So she had to go learn how to do it.
Yeah.
I wasn't paying her hourly to set up the onboarding. I paid her
to get the job done,
X amount to get the job done, and gave her a deadline of which to do it, right? Had she not met the deadline, we would have been having a different conversation, right? But do I care if it took you 10 hours or 50? No, because your job was to set up the automated onboarding for our clients by this date.
Yeah.
And so learning how to get really clear in what you're looking for from a results perspective, I think is probably more important than like efficiency.
Yeah. I like it. What's some advice that you would give your 2017 version of yourself? I love this shimmy.
So hard to think about, you know, because it's like, well, for me, I think I say this often, but like what you start with is not what you'll end with. And that's okay.
Yeah.
In the beginning, we are so attached. We have an idea, right? That's how we became entrepreneurs, because we had an idea and we get really attached to the idea. And so then we turn ourselves into like, you know, boxes. We play Twister and we do all this other stuff to try to fit the idea in the box, instead of, you know, just letting it happen and being like, oh, that's cool, we should bolt that on. Or, oh yeah, originally I see why I thought that was really smart, but we're actually going to leave that off. Or, you know, I thought we were going to do a little bit more of this, but it turns out our clients are asking us for a little bit more of that. And just really being okay with letting feedback and your intuition be the guide, instead of trying to control everything. So I guess if I had to boil it down to one sentence to your very specific question was, you know, just like follow your intuition, trust your gut.
Yeah, I like it. Do you think your 2017 version yourself would have been making good decisions with that advice?
Yeah, I do. I mean, always made good decisions. I was successful in my career. I was smart.
Yeah. It's. I ask because sometimes I ask myself that question of if I told myself this 5 years ago, would I have listened? Or would I have, you know, made the right decisions? And I struggle with it sometimes because I feel like the journey was the win. Sure. Right? But
that's assuming there's a right and a wrong decision.
It's true. Yeah.
I don't think that's a thing.
Yeah. I think they're just decisions. I agree. It's you have to measure it against something, right? You have to. Are you trying to get to the destination as fast as possible? Then maybe, yeah, your decision wasn't right. But if you're trying to achieve something that's rooted in, like you said, a principle earlier, then the journey is the journey. So I like it.
But I think the journey is always the journey, right? Because like, was the decision I made the fastest path? No, but the decision I made taught me these things. So again, I mean, because we always want to go as fast as we, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm on my way to, where I want to go as quickly as possible. But I think the fear of making right and wrong decisions actually holds more people back than actually making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
The fear of, is this the right decision, is more paralyzing than actually the idea of like making the wrong decision and course correcting.
I 100% agree. That's going to be the snippet of this episode.
There's always one, right?
It's always one. There's so many nuggets in here. Okay, so I want to do some quick hitters or concluding questions, but you feel free to elaborate. You've mentioned a couple books at the beginning, so I won't ask for 3 recommendations. I'll ask for one. For a listener, what's one book you think they should absolutely listen to?
Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt.
Okay. All right. I haven't heard that one, so I'm gonna have to look it up.
It's a sales book. It's about keeping your pipeline full.
All right.
Because everything else we've talked about today doesn't mean anything if business isn't making any money.
That is true. True. Okay, what's a question that you think I should ask the next guest?
What's the question I think you should ask the next guest? I think a fun question is to ask them, what did you think it would look like, right? Because what we start with isn't what we end with. So like when you started your business, what was the vision, and like where are you in that vision?
Got it. So I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, just because I think we've touched on the answer to that question. Looking back, how do you think dreaming of being a writer connects to where you are today and what your business is today?
Well, because, dreaming of being a writer was really just a desire to tell stories. And I tell stories every day. Yeah. I tell stories from a marketing perspective. I tell stories. How many stories have we talked about here today? I mean, it's really just the desire to use words to express yourself. And I happen to be excellent at that.
I love it. What type of entrepreneur would you be most interested in hearing on the podcast?
What I find really fascinating is a space that I've not played in at all. Like I super love the SaaS world, like the tech space that like whirlwind, started a business, got funded, like overnight success.
Yeah.
But like with a piece of technology, because that's a whole different ballgame. Like I love hearing stories of like investors and like how quickly you build infrastructure around something like that. It just blows my mind a little bit, right? Because again, as somebody who sells primarily info products and community and those types of things, I can scale to the moon and back, and technology is kind of a non-issue for me, right? But I think that adds this whole different element, and I find it really fascinating.
Interesting. All right. We have an episode coming out tomorrow with some tech founders. Thank you. That
bootstrapped. Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting.
I like the bootstrapped version, but then I also like the funded version.
The funded version.
Like the well-funded, like at that question, right? Like 2017-year-old you, like what, or 2017-year-old you, like what decisions would you have made when it comes to like taking on capital and those, because I feel like I think of how starry-eyed I was at that time. I cannot possibly imagine having the mental fortitude to be able to make that decision, even know what questions to ask to make that decision. You know what I'm saying? Like it just still kind of blows my mind. Now I live in a world where I'm extremely fortunate to have the right people around me to be able to do that. So given that opportunity, I would not have to make those decisions alone. I know the 3 people I would call, but I would not have known those people 5 years ago.
Ryann, this was incredible.
Yeah.
I learned so much. I'm still super excited that you gave me an answer to the question that I did not expect. I love those moments of just kind of dissonance. Sure. But yeah, no, this is incredible. I think you've helped me in my own journey. I think you'll help the listeners. And if there's anything I can do to be helpful to you in your business, please let me know. But also tell people where they can find you.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was super fun. And it was kind of fun because I podcast guest a lot. I shared that with you. But I haven't like dug that far into the origin story in a really long time. So that was kind of fun to think through that journey and what that looks like, because it's super easy to forget, right? Yeah. It's super easy to just be like, just figure it out because you did. But like in the moment, just figure it out felt like the most useless piece of advice ever. Right. So it's kind of fun to reconnect to that feeling because you realize how like, you're like, yeah. But it's like, no, it felt colossal at the time, right? All the decisions you have to make and all the things that you have to do and the person you have to become to be successful. Like you can't even dream of that when you're in the moment. So it was a lot of fun. Where to find me? I have a Facebook group called Be in the Room. Beintheroom.org is our website. You can follow us on Instagram at Be in the Room Official. I love to talk to people. I am Ryann with 2 N's Dowdy on any social platform. My inbox is always open. I like people. I like conversation. So I'd love to hear if there's part of the story that's helpful or interesting. I'd love to hear it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryann. If you found this video to be helpful, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. If you're an entrepreneur and want to share your journey and be helpful to others, please hit us up on our social media channels, or you can shoot us an email at behelpfulpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. Be helpful.